Vice President Harris says she will visit Mexico and Guatemala next month. It will mark the vice president's first trip abroad since being elected. President Biden has tasked the VP with leading his administration's efforts to address migration from Central and South America. Mr. Biden has called her, quote, the most qualified person to address the issue. Immigration advocates are criticizing what they say is an unfair policy being used by the Department of Homeland Security for deportations. The rule, known as Title 42, was first invoked under the Trump administration. It is an emergency public health statute allowing the U.S. to quickly expel migrants who cross U.S. borders. According to reporting by our Camilo Montoya Galvez, advocates say the rule is, quote, inconsistent and seemingly arbitrary. They say it's unclear how and why some families are expelled from the U.S. while others can stay. Lee Gelernt is a lawyer for the American Civil Liberties Union. He's the lead attorney on litigation related to family separation and joins me now from New York City. Lee, welcome. Great to have you with us. So tell us a little bit more about Title 42. Why does DHS continue to implement it under this administration? And why do immigration advocates like yourself oppose its use?
Yeah, so Title 42 is the name of the part of the United States Code that deals with public health. President Trump had been trying from the very beginning of his administration to stop Central Americans from coming here and applying for asylum, no matter how much danger they were in. He thought he found the silver bullet in COVID and enacted what's called the Title 42 policy, saying it's just too dangerous because of COVID to let migrants in. But the public health laws don't allow deportations and expulsions, much less to override asylum. What they allow for are basic public health measures like testing, like quarantining. So we brought a lawsuit at the end of the Trump administration. We were really troubled by the fact that the Biden administration has kept it. Fortunately, the Biden administration has exempted unaccompanied children, but it has kept it for families and is doing real damage. And what it's also doing is creating self-separation. Families are saying, well, at least let my children be safe and we'll go. We have sued about it. We have said to the Biden administration, we will negotiate about this for a while, but ultimately we may just be back in court because we don't think there is any public health justification for allowing this. We can test families, we can quarantine, and we can do whatever is necessary. And especially as the country is reopening, people are vaccinated. This is causing real harm. It's being implemented arbitrarily, and families are being sent back to danger without any asylum hearing whatsoever.
And on Monday, Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas told CBS this morning the Biden administration is working closely with the ACLU on migrant family reunifications. What more can you tell us about that partnership, and how many families does the ACLU believe are still separated at this point?
Yeah, so as I think you know, we brought a lawsuit in 2018, won that lawsuit to stop family separations to get reunifications. Unfortunately, there are still 1,000, maybe in excess of 1,000 families still separated because the Trump administration was not taking efforts to remedy the problem. We have also not found the parents of 455 children, which is just shocking this far down the road. But ultimately, the Trump administration separated more than 5,500 children, hundreds of whom were just babies and toddlers. So we are in settlement negotiations with the Biden administration for comprehensive relief. Not only do we want these families found and brought back to the U.S. to be with their children, but we want them to get social services, including mental health services, compensation, and ultimately the right to stay here. We'll never make these families whole again, but we need to do everything possible. As the president has said, this is a moral stain on our country. It's the worst thing I have seen in my more than 30 years doing this work. We have to get this done. I was in Philadelphia on Tuesday for one of the first reunions under the Biden administration. It was just incredibly emotional. These children had not seen their mother for over 3 years. We have to make this right.
It is devastating that so many children remain separated from their families. Where are these children, being housed? What can you tell us about their situations?
Right. It is devastating. what happened was the children were taken away from the parents without explanation. Sometimes they didn't even get to give their children a hug. They were sent across the country and they were placed in government facilities for some amount of time, then ultimately given to what's called sponsors. If the child was lucky, it was a close relative who was already living in the U.S. who maybe the child knew. If they were unlucky, it was a stranger or maybe a distant relative. So the children are now with somebody, a relative or a foster care family, and the parents who are still separated are largely still in Central America. The Trump administration gave these parents only two brutal choices: never see your child again or bring your child back to the very danger from which they fled. Fortunately, the Biden administration is giving them a third choice: to come back to the U.S., to be safe, and be with their children. I think anybody who could have seen this reunion on Tuesday and the visceral reaction by the family and the children seeing their mother for the first time, being able to hug their mother, I don't see how they wouldn't say, let's get this done immediately. Fortunately, my negotiations with the Biden administration are going well. They're in good faith, they're constructive, and we just hope this moves very quickly now.
You know, I want to ask you about the situation at the border because it is often characterized as a crisis by the media, you know, by Republicans who perhaps are looking for something concrete to criticize the new administration on. I'm wondering, you have been there yourself. You're working with many, you know, migrants, those looking for asylum, these families. How would you characterize the situation there?
I would say it's a humanitarian crisis for these families, but not a crisis for the U.S. government. The U.S. government has more than enough resources to handle this process, to make it orderly, because everyone wants the asylum system to be more efficient, of course, but we can't say, let's send these families back to danger without a hearing. We just need to build up capacity. The Biden administration had a challenge left over from the Trump administration, the backlog that built up under the Trump administration dismantling the system. But now, you know, it's been a long time that the Biden administration has been in power. I think they just need to start letting people in. After World War II, we said we would never again turn our back on people fleeing danger. We can't start now just because these are Central Americans. We have to give them a process. Not everyone will be allowed to stay ultimately, but they all are entitled to a hearing. We have to get that done. It can be orderly, it can be efficient, but we can't just send them back to danger without a hearing, which is unfortunately what the Biden administration is doing now.
Lee Gelernt, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.